Hello. In this video from Justia Webinars, Writing Like the Best Legal Writers, we go through the discussion portion of the webinar, where we talked with David Kemp about the relationship between legal writing and artificial intelligence tools. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
We will now move on to the discussion portion of the webinar. Thank you, David, for being here. Marina will be asking David some pertinent questions about his presentation, and then we will go through our audience Q&A. Marina, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Nina, and thank you, David. Thanks to all of you for being here. I hope that was, interesting and shared some great new information with all of y'all. Now that we have David here to talk with us and have a little bit of a discussion, I know one of the hot new things that's in the news, he talked about it, everybody seems to be talking about it, is this AI Chat GPT, similar things like it. So David, I'll let you take it away. I guess the first really burning question here for you is, how important is Chat GPT going to be? Is this revolutionizing how we write for our practices? Is it writing demand letters, legal documents? What are the limitations?
Absolutely. I think it's something that we really want to pay close attention to. It's something that has been sort of simmering for a while. I think those who are well versed in technology are probably aware that it's been around or these types of technologies have been around for a while. But it's just now coming into sort of the public view, and there's this awe and fascination with what it can do, and then sort of I think it's very impressive. And I think as we get, it builds on more and more people using it and getting that data and getting the input and the feedback on that data. And so as it gets this greater acceptance and greater use in the general public, I think it's going to start growing and improving very rapidly. So as I pointed out, I don't think it's going to replace anyone yet, any human writers or editors. But I think it's very close to being a tool that we should all consider as something that will make our work more efficient, perhaps more thorough, and something that we should probably embrace rather than reject, both as educators, but also as practicing attorneys. I think it holds a lot of promise.
No, that makes sense. And so if I'm, the kind of lawyer who I like to be on the cutting edge of things, I'm willing to try it out. So, I see this new thing. How much of my work can it replace? Could it write my whole brief for me? Is it dealing with facts, legal issues? Where does that line stop, do you think? Are there ethical concerns?
All of the above. Well, we'll take that one piece at a time. So it definitely is not ready to write your briefs for you. And as we saw from some of the examples, it's not very good at getting the facts right. And so if something is fact heavy, or you may have to input some of the facts, it may just get things completely wrong. So it's definitely not ready to do a lot of those parts of legal writing for you. One of the things that it can do potentially, and this is something that I'm playing around with in terms of how I'm teaching law students, is how does it construct these sentences and the paragraphs and entire passages of sentences and paragraphs, and how do we learn from that and improve upon that, right? So maybe ChatGPT will produce a paragraph for us that talks about a case, and we go in as humans and facts check to make sure, is this correct? But what it does is it starts off with a clear topic sentence that tells what the holding was. Maybe we adjust it to be more precise, but then it goes in and gives some of the background. Maybe it gives the procedural history. Again, that's a strong way of structuring a paragraph, and so we can learn from that. So I think at sort of a micro level, I think if we ask it to write a sentence and we give it very specific directions, I think it's already pretty good at that, and it's only going to improve. A paragraph, it's going to run into a few more problems. And again, we can give it some feedback, and it will continue to improve. Entire sections, entire briefs, entire documents, I think it's a long way from being able to do that. But as with any tool, I think in the hands of people who really know what they're doing already, it can be very effective in making your time more efficient, right? So if I'm an expert in copyright law, I might be able to ask very precise, directed questions and use it to help me draft a sentence or come up with an idea that I might have eventually gotten around to, but it's much faster at it. So it's certainly in the hands of someone who knows the terminology and knows what questions to ask. it can be potentially very, very powerful. To the second part of your question about the ethical issues, there's a whole host of ethical issues that I alluded to in the presentation, but we can sort of touch on a few of them now, I think that, because I think they're really fascinating. And one thing that I would hesitate to do is, I think that often we say, oh, there's a whole host of ethical issues, we should just reject it outright. And I think that would be the wrong approach. I think with technology like ChatGPT or AI or machine learning more generally, we should investigate those ethical issues and figure out how can we get ahead of the curve? How can we address those at the outset, right early on, so that they don't become problematic later? And some of the ethical issues associated with ChatGPT specifically include copyright. So ChatGPT, we don't know exactly how it works. It could be drawing from sources that are copyrighted materials, and then spitting that back out to us and saying, look at what I created from my, AI black box. But that's something that we would have to be certain of, so that we don't run afoul of copyright law. As an educator, one of the things that I am acutely aware of is that students might find it very appealing. If they've got a deadline coming up, law students always have deadlines coming up. To turn to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you help me draft this first draft of this memo that I have to write for class, or something like that. And so plagiarism, there may be plagiarism issues there as well. So is that plagiarism if the student just asks ChatGPT to draft something for them? There are other contexts as well. I mean, for lawyers, we also can get in trouble for plagiarism. And so to what extent do we need to disclose that something that we've written, or that we claim we have written, was actually generated by ChatGPT? The ethics rules in most states are pretty clear that we cannot mislead in stating that maybe we wrote something when in fact we didn't. So there's certainly ethical issues around that as well. And then one final, there are a bunch, but one that I think is really fascinating as well is this idea of confidentiality. So we are privy to lots of confidential client information, and to draft anything about those clients or related to those client matters, we would probably have to give ChatGPT some of that confidential information, and that would potentially run afoul of ethics rules. So there's a lot of nuance to ChatGPT for sure. Certainly there are these ethical issues that we should investigate and look to see what can we do about them from the outset. But I think it's exciting technology, and I think we should embrace it rather than reject it, because it is the future. It's here, and it's only going to become more and more pervasive in all sorts of professions, but I think especially in the legal profession.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are definitely great insights. And I have a follow-up discussion question for you. I know that there's some limitations here, but we can embrace it to really help transform our practices. So I guess a related question for that legal research and that writing component of things is Westlaw. So I don't know how much attention you pay to Westlaw and, day in, day out, but, legal research matters. And I think that, Westlaw is venturing into this from what I've seen. They've got some hybrid research and writing tools, some AI they've got going on there. I mean, do you have any insights into that and whether or not it's more effective for lawyers than ChatGPT?
I do think that any of the AI related tools that Westlaw and Lexis are developing are going to be more helpful for lawyers than a general tool like ChatGPT, at least for now, because those major companies are focused exclusively on tools to help lawyers. They've got huge teams of people working on them and making sure that whatever they're producing is sufficient for their subscriber base. And ChatGPT just has a sort of a different approach and a different focus. It's much more aimed at the general public for right now. And so I think Westlaw and Lexis are both going to be more reliable sources for things that's specifically for lawyers, at least for the near future. That said, I think that we would be remiss by ignoring ChatGPT as it pertains to law and the practice of law and legal education as well. Because it's really going to go in different directions from what I think Westlaw is going to do, especially, Westlaw is helpful for research for sure. I mean, some of the most interesting advances that they've introduced recently have to do with suggesting cases that you might not have cited or that you didn't cite that you might be interested in reading, or cases that your opponent cites, or if you upload someone else's brief, cases that they don't cite, or maybe that might have been overturned since it was written. So that kind of stuff, I think Westlaw and Lexis are going to far excel ahead of what Chat GPT is going to be able to do for now, because the makers of Chat GPT are just not interested in those features, in that functionality. And so for those reasons, I think that Westlaw and Lexis and the products that they produce that are based on AI will for a while be much more helpful for lawyers, even if they're not as awe-inspiring or impressive as Chat GPT. I think from a practical standpoint, they're probably going to be more reliable.
Well said. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but talking in terms of reliability, Chat GPT is easy to access. It's free. If I'm a solo or working on a budget and I'm using Fastcase or other free legal resource solutions, I'm not using Westlaw. I guess there is kind of a question mark there is, can ChatGPT help me with the law? Can I ask it a legal question? Will it give me the correct answers? Or do I need to be cautious there as well?
You can ask it a legal question. It will give you an answer, but whether it's the correct answer, it is up in the air. And I think one of the things that we're finding just in the tests that I've done is that sometimes it gives an answer that's close but not quite right. And sometimes it'll give an answer that's completely wrong, because ChatGPT doesn't really have an understanding of how the law works or legal principles. So for example, this morning I asked whether same-sex marriage is legal in Georgia, and it said no, which we know is not legally accurate. But what I did was ChatGPT is sort of a two-way street. It's not just ask it questions, it spits out answers. So I said, that's incorrect. And I pointed it to the Obergefell Supreme Court decision, and it responded and said, oh, I'm sorry. It's not illegal in Georgia based on this Obergefell decision. And then I had a conversation with it and said, is it not, so when was it legalized? And it gave me the decision date for Obergefell. So it is learning, it's constantly learning, but it's definitely, it doesn't have a sophisticated or even primitive understanding of how the law works. So ask it a legal question at your own peril. But I think, and factual questions as well, I think it's just not quite there yet. But it's interesting, it's learning. I read an anecdote earlier today that a judge in Colombia, the country, actually used ChatGPT to look up some facts about some psychological issue or something. And I think that's fairly problematic. Honestly, I think that probably is not the type of diligence that one needs to do to satisfy one's obligations, one's professional obligations. But it raises interesting questions, right? That it's so easy to find answers, but in the same way that we're not going to cite Wikipedia as a reliable source when we cite in say a court filing. Similarly, I think we can't cite, oh, ChatGPT gave me this answer, and so I'm going to refer you to that as my source.
Yeah, no, I mean, that definitely makes sense, and is something to be aware of as we kind of figure out how that can work in our practices. On a related note, and talking about being a strong writer, taking advantage of all the resources out there for you. So if I'm the kind of lawyer that's a little bit more hesitant to try the latest and greatest thing, I'm not going to integrate ChatGPT yet. I'm not going to jump on the Westlaw AI bandwagon. But I am interested in, I guess, tools to make my life easier. I mean, I know there's various form databases out there. Westlaw has one. Other online sites have them. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, for somebody who wants to use forms and those kinds of resources to improve their legal writing and kind of streamline their process, I mean, is that a viable alternative, or is AI better? Are they equal parts? How much work does that save you?
Absolutely. I think I would describe that as a sort of, they're not primitive, but they're more original, the more traditional ways of ensuring that, there are checklists and forms and templates and stuff. And I think those are valuable resources for ensuring that you're producing a document that contains all the components that it needs to contain, or that you're thinking through everything that you need to think through. And those are really valuable, and I don't want to discount those. I think that that many people, rightfully so, are going to be hesitant to adopt AI and Chat GPT, at least as far as they know that they're using it. They're not going to go out of their way to use these technologies. And I think that's going to be fine for a while, but I think probably within the next 5 to 10 years or so, we're going to see more and more that you need to use some of these advancing technologies to meet your obligation of diligence, for example. I mean, take, for instance, key cite and shepherdizing. If you don't shepherdize a case, you don't key cite a case, and it's been overruled, very recently, that falls on you, right? That's a problem with your diligence and representation. And I think that means that you are required to adopt these no longer new, but they were new at one point, technologies, right? And so I think at some point, AI, whether it's Chat GPT, probably some other iteration of that, is going to be almost a necessity of legal practice. Whether that's in 5 years or 10 years, it's hard to say. But I do think that while we can certainly rely on these traditional tools, we should continue to look forward as well. And lawyers are notoriously bad about looking forward rather than holding on to what has been done, because that's sort of the nature of the profession.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I was going to say the same thing. As a lawyer, I can say that notoriously we're slow to adapt to change. So I suspect it'll be on that 10-year mark. Before we kind of move into some of the other discussion points we do have a poll for the audience, and we'd love to get some of your input and thought while we're having this discussion on Chat GPT. So there's 2 questions here. The first one is related to sentences. So we've got four options here, and we'd love for you to tell us which one of these sentences you think that Chat GPT wrote. And then the second one is just your opinion. I mean, how do you see AI affecting law practice? Do you think it's going to take 10 more years? Do you think it's a tool that will replace lawyers? We've given you a few options, and we'd love to know which one of those resonates most with you. So we'll give you a minute or 2 to kind of look at those options, send in your thoughts, and then we'll look at the results together. While they're answering those, I'm sitting here thinking which one I think. And, hosts and panelists unfortunately can't vote, but I'll be interested to see whether or not we all agree. Nina, if you want to close that poll and share some results, we'll chat about them real quick.
Yeah, perfect. So the results for the first question, the majority of people chose C. That was 38% of you chose C. The second closest was A. So that was the second closest answer. David, did you want to reveal what the correct answer was?
Absolutely. So I'm impressed that 38% of you were correct in guessing C. So this was an interesting one for me to write that question, because I wrote A, B, and D myself, and then asked Chat GPT to write one as well. And I mean, they're almost indistinguishable, I think. I mean, they do I think they're very, very similar. And there's nothing in my mind that really gives away C. There's nothing that I can quite put my finger on as to why it doesn't feel as human, but it's sort of my gut tells me, and it seems that many of you agree that it just doesn't feel as though it was written by a human, and it's not completely clear what it is that is. And I think that's probably indicative of a lot of the writing that ChatGPT is producing right now, is that there's something slightly off about it. We just can't quite put our finger on what it is, and sometimes it's obvious. I was thinking about what kind of questions could you ask it to trip it up and make it clear that it is AI rather than a human. And I think we can all it's fun to brainstorm those types of questions. And but I think it's going to get better and better at that. And I think I wrote this question in part to indicate how good it is at some of these types of tasks, especially when it's very specific, and the question or the prompt is narrowly tailored to the answer that you are kind of expecting it to produce. And I'm sorry, I didn't see the results for the second question.
Yeah, let me go ahead and see if I can share those now. So for the second one, the majority of the people, 89% of you, voted B, to be a tool for lawyers to improve their productivity and efficiency. And the other 11% voted C, to improve public access to courts and law.
Okay, great. And that is exactly what I expected the votes to be on that one. I can't imagine a room full of lawyers would vote to expect the AI to replace them. And I definitely think that we are a long way from there, if that's even ever going to be a possibility. I think that there wasn't a single right answer to that question. And I was really interested to hear your thoughts on kind of the future of AI. And I think it's right that AI for the foreseeable future is something to embrace as a tool, particularly in the hands of lawyers, experts, to make their work more efficient, so that they can spend less time doing that, first draft of something that they have to do over and over again, and spend more time on really making it exceptional. And I think that's going to be for a long time, that's going to be the human touch of taking something that maybe was created by AI and then making it really good, making it human. And I think that's probably going to be the relationship that we have, both lawyers with AI, but also I think that the human race really is with AI is sort of as interacting. I talked earlier about sort of this conversation that I had with Chat GPT, where I asked it a question, it gave me the wrong answer, and I corrected it, and then I asked it a follow-up question, and it had course corrected based on the feedback that I gave it. And I think if we view AI and Chat GPT specifically through the lens of this is a dialogue, this is a conversation, that we will come to sort of grow alongside it and figure out how we can both improve with the help of each other. And that sounds very very touchy-feely, but I think that's a great and an important way of viewing this technology, because if we ignore it, I think that's to our detriment. If we put it up on a pedestal, I think that's also not called for. I think that's too much. But I think if we have this sort of conversation, and especially when it comes to producing content, doing writing, that we will all be able to improve in a way that's much more efficient than the means that we've had previously.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely some good insights, and I love seeing what everybody in the audience here had to say today. I do have one more kind of discussion point for you before we start taking those audience questions, and that's a little bit more about those tools that everybody's more familiar with, that have been around a little bit longer. So you've got built-in spell check into Microsoft Word. You talked a little bit about Grammarly online, and sure, WordPerfect has its own version of these things. And so I guess for somebody who's trying to streamline their practice while making things more effective, we all trust and rely on those tools. But the question for you is, are they superior to each other? Is there anything to watch out for with those? Or, are they something that we can pretty well say helps you improve your writing and improves your practice?
Yeah, I think that they're all important tools. And I think one of the considerations is going to be cost. So for most of us, law students, but also lawyers, most people have access to Microsoft Office already, because that's sort of the most commonly used word processing tool. And so they already have access to spell check and grammar check. And so that's pretty good. And I think Grammarly is slightly more sophisticated, although it has its own limitations as well. So the free version of Grammarly can do basic spell check, grammar check, and so on. But you miss out on some of the things that I think Grammarly really has to offer, like tone detection and suggestions for full sentence rewrites, suggestions for consistency throughout a document, like spelling or the term that you use to describe something. And so those aspects of Grammarly, the premium version of Grammarly, I think are sort of a step up from what Office currently offers. That said, as we know, Microsoft is an investor in Chat GPT, and they've already announced integration with Microsoft Teams as sort of keeping meeting minutes, setting agendas, and so on. So I think it's just a matter of time, or probably not very much time at that, before we see Microsoft implements AI or Chat GPT in other aspects of Microsoft Office, in which case maybe that's going to be sufficient for all of our needs. I was sort of reminiscing about Clippy, the paperclip assistant who used to be in Microsoft Office. And I think Clippy is probably going to make a comeback in the form of a more sophisticated AI that helps us. Originally it would say, it looks like you're drafting a resume. Would you like help with that? I think the suggestions and the observations that it's going to be making, that or whatever assistance it happens to be, will be much more sophisticated, much more complex, much more helpful ultimately. So I'm excited to see what direction that goes and what it looks like.
Yes, no, I think we're all excited about the return of Clippy. I know I would be, Adam. That was my friend. So with that kind of said, I'll end our discussion here. I'm going to hand things back over to my colleague, Nina. She's going to take some of those questions that you guys submitted from the audience during the course of this presentation and let David give y'all some more specific answers.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Marina and David. We will now take the audience questions, as Marina mentioned. If you do have a question for David that you'd like to ask, feel free to click that Q&A button in your control panel and submit that question to us. It looks like we already have a few, so I can go ahead and dive right in. Our first question for David is going to be, is there a risk of the content ChatGPT produces having bias or discrimination in it?
Absolutely. And that's a risk with any sort of AI system, because AI learns based on a data set. And if there are biases within that data set, then those biases get reproduced in the contents that the AI system generates. And so that's something that I think the developers, but also sort of the regulators have to watch for, is ensuring that that we're looking at the data that these technologies are learning from, and if there is bias in the data, that we do something to counteract that so that we don't perpetuate it. And sort of the same thing goes with misinformation as well. So we're already saying that if ChatGPT is learning from something that is simply not true, then it spits it back out as if it were true. And so we need to be very careful in checking for that to ensure that we don't perpetuate misinformation or bias.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. It looks like our next question was more related to the presentation. You mentioned plain English. What exactly is that? Why is it important?
Absolutely. So plain English, and so there's sort of two connotations of that. In more colloquially, plain English really just refers to understandable language that doesn't have too much legalese, that just your typical layperson can understand. There's also a movement among government employees. It's called the I forgot the name of it actually, but it's just called the Plain English movement, I think. And it's aimed at educating and training government agency employees to use plain English or more understandable language in government documents that they're producing, whether that be regulations or manuals or guidelines or anything like that. And so it's an unfunded set of volunteers who are doing this, but they're really committed to improving access and improving understandability of government's documents for the general public.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we have time for a couple more questions. So the next one is, if I use ChatGPT, how concerned should I be about plagiarism?
I would say that if you use ChatGPT to produce content for you, you should treat it as though it were a first-year law student producing content for you and edit it with a heavy hand. Make sure that you check all the facts, make sure that you check all the legal conclusions, check for grammar and spelling and citations and all of that. I mean, I think it's as we've talked about, it is a tool. It's a valuable tool and it can save you a lot of time. But its reliability is very low right now. And so definitely review anything that it's producing, especially if you plan to use it in a court filing, on your website, anything that's public, anything that has your name attached to it, I would say make sure that you exercise great diligence in ensuring that everything is factually true and legally correct.
Okay, perfect. It looks like our last question for the day is related to Westlaw. I know you and Marina discussed that a bit already, but the question is, what are Westlaw Forms, databases, and dockets good for?
So Westlaw Forms, databases, dockets, and so on can help you find examples of whatever kind of documents you may be looking for, and sort of serve as the foundation of whatever you're trying to produce. But it's not, unlike with some of the other more sophisticated tools, it's not going to auto-populate things for you. You really have to fill in all of the specifics. And so it's good. I mean, I think of it as sort of a template or a blank form that you can fill in all the specifics. But it's one of the more traditional or conventional tools that we have to help us, not one of the more, cutting edge where you just say a few things and it generates the whole document for you. So more reliable, less, but also more work on your ends to fill it in.
Wonderful. That looks like all the questions we have time for today. Thank you again, David, for being here, for the discussion, your presentation, and all of the questions.
We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more law practice and legal marketing videos. See you in our next clip.